So, my topic today is about improving productivity on the shop floor with edge computing. This is something of interest to me. Currently, I'm in the manufacturing side of things, actually outside medical devices right now, because a startup drew me in with a very good opportunity to manage the manufacturing for their product. And it's been fun thinking about how to make the manufacturing floor intelligent. And it's also a component of some of the collaboration that I do with my brother, who's Sai. He couldn't make it to the conference, so it's just me presenting today. So to get started, we know it's very obvious what is a factory floor, aimed at, right? The primary focus should always be safety, because if things are not safe, that's a huge problem. But after that, we're looking at quality, especially when it comes to medical devices, and of course productivity, commercial profits, and things like that. And then making sure that we stay competitive in the market, right? And over the decades, we've been always trying to use newer technologies, newer tools to take advantage of this, to create an unfair advantage. So, kind of setting the stage there for how edge computing would help us get to that point. So, just a quick 5-second thing. How did we get here? Why are we talking about edge computing? Advances in computational technology, hardware in the form of sensors, have led to immense amounts of data. With improvements in algorithms, we now have AI, right? Now, AI is a very big topic. What we call AI here is basically machine learning, some intelligence, right? You get some data, you train, a computer program, which is usually an ensemble of algorithms, if you will, and you try to make some decisions, try to add some intelligence to your data, right? Why? Because we tend to produce so much data nowadays. People are just sitting on piles and piles of data and not effectively using them. So, if there are a few messages from this talk I'd like to pass on. One is, don't sit on your data, right? The data has, it has perpetual value, but it has value to make immediate effects possible, right? So that said, the other thing that's come about that everybody, I'm sure, has heard, multiple speakers here today. There's a lot of firms inside, commercial organizations, and this is a non-commercial talk. Is IIoT, right? There's the talk of regular maintenance, unplanned maintenance, monitoring, predictive maintenance, and so on, right? And all of that again happens because of sensors hooked up to all of your machines, hooked up to your employees, and that's where this information is coming in. So on one end we have the computation, and on the other end we have the hardware, and the marriage of that is what led to AI. But then let's talk about edge computing, which is kind of the narrow focus of today's talk. So to get to that point, what is edge computing? It's the ability to make localized decisions. So in this context, it's shop floor. In an agricultural context, it could be a portion of the farms you're managing, right? And so on and so forth, right? So coming back to like manufacturing, medical devices, that kind of thing, regardless of where you are, the idea is you make the decisions at the point where things can happen. Things either go wrong or are about to go wrong, and we're trying to make those decisions possible, right? And like I said, currently what we talk about when we talk about AI, we're talking about this narrow AI, which is machine learning, which looks at patterns. It's able to, you train it with a certain set of patterns, and it's trying to find the same patterns or better patterns with the data. And that's how you get, oh, the temperature is too high, the humidity is too low. I worked at the last startup I worked at, we had to frequently keep shutting down our floor when the humidity sensor went off. And it was annoying because we would shut down after the humidity sensor went off, and I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we'd open our bay doors to bring the humidity in. What comes in when you're near the bay along with humidity? Any thoughts? Salt, right? And so that wasn't fun. So predictive maintenance would have really helped us there. We kept complaining, but there wasn't a budget. But that is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about edge computing, right? Another way of thinking about it is you have connectivity on one end, right? You have storage, which is computational storage, where data can be stored locally, right? And then you have the actual computation ability. And that sort of intersection forms what we call nodes. And then if you have a shop floor with 20 machines or 100 machines or 20 groups of 6 machines each, however you want to do the permutations and combinations of what your shop floor looks like, we're talking about there being nodes at different points on the machines themselves, the environmental monitors that go on them, the safety monitors, right? And it's funny, some of the stuff seems new to us, but because of a grad school project I worked on since the 90s, at least in Japan, Toyota's had a camera that can look at the driver and find out when they're distracted, right? You can imagine workplace safety being so much better. Of course, there's privacy concerns and all that come with that. But if we were able to put those types of things together, it would be so great. And those things are happening. And so edge computing is all of that, not just machine sensors, not just environmental sensors. It's everything that's happening on the shop floor. And that includes feeding into MRP, feeding into ERP, both ways, right? And so that's how I'd like for you to think about this. So to give a little bit more context, right? When we hear of IoT in general, we think of, okay, there's sensors at one end, and then there's connectivity, and that data then goes to a cloud, right? And we'll talk about this again, but when you send data to the cloud and analyze it, it's great. We're doing that a lot. But what's happening is that sort of thing takes time, right? There's latency. So one of my frustrations with my Fitbit, major Fitbit geek, have almost never taken this off since 2017. Thing is, I like to walk the 250 steps an hour, right? I think the Apple Watches have a similar thing, but there's no real-time feedback from Fitbit, right? We actually wrote an app that kind of sort of works. So you have to do the math in your head, right? So that's what I'm talking about in latency. Going back and finding out, oh, between 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock, if I had only walked 15 more steps, right? That's not any use, right? If I only find that out the next day or the next week when Fitbit sends me a report. That's what edge computing can do for us, right? Something is happening or something is about to happen, which is really the ideal place we want to be at, is something is about to happen and we want to prevent that from happening. And we want to affect change there. That's where edge computing comes into play. So that's in this next slide. And that's where interference at the edge, right? I can't get the laser to work, but you can see that big purplish red guy. If we have inference at the edge, then we are learning what's going on. And so that's the big advantage here. So again, trying to sort of make that difference clear between classical sort of cloud computing and edge computing. In the sort of classic situation, you have the scenario where there's immense volumes of data. If you had 20 nodes producing, say 20 gigs of data a day each, that's 400 gigs of data, right? That's an over-the-top example, but you get the general idea. There's network issues that come with that quantity of data, and of course, a lot of times you have urgency. You don't want to find out next week that your tools were already wearing out on Wednesday, and now this whole lot you produced from Wednesday to Friday or whatnot have become questionable, and you want to bring IQC back and all that stuff, right? So we want to try to attack that problem right then and there where it's happening. So we want rapid response, which allows us to make changes. And the changes don't have to be automated. It could still be a field rep going there and doing something, but you do that, right? And that brings about robust operations. So that's the big advantage of edge computing over cloud computing, right? So factory safety is one. I'll detail asset management a little bit more, but asset management is making sure you know where your assets are, when they're going to come due, right? Those things already exist, right? If you go to a good calibration shop, they put a little human readable sticker on there. Now we're talking about QR codes and barcodes in machine vision and that kind of stuff, which can automate something, right? So that 2 companies ago we looked at this prototype. It's a large organization, so they have several lines where they can afford to do this. A camera that sits right on top of the workspace and it can scan things, right? So the ability to look at, oh, you're using a tool that's going to come due in 1 week, and actually being able to alert that. On top of what the software can do, like SAP or some of these programs can do, it's good to be able to do that on the machine end of things as well. Limited connectivity options on the floor, that's a big thing if you want to use cloud. So edge computing helps a lot if you don't have that sort of affordable connectivity, especially if you are managing some of your shop floor operations in developing nations and things like that. Data lakes can be very expensive. So the question is, do you want to send raw data up to the cloud, or do you want to send processed information up to the cloud? Making that differentiation can actually save you thousands to tens of thousands of dollars or more a year, right? So edge computing, again, so that makes the case, right? If I'm spending $100,000 just uploading humidity data for 8 hours a day or temperature data for 8 hours a day, am I getting something? I'm not getting any value out of that until I get to the analysis. How about I have an onboard diagnostics that says, okay, here are the 3 times during the day, 3 times during the week where things have been anomalous, where there have been temporary shutdowns or something like that, and you only upload that data. You then run a Tableau report, and you have some more intelligence to what you're looking at, right? That is cost saving. So that's another way to look at, where would I use things, right? On-premise requirements. Sometimes there's confidentiality, sometimes there's a security issues, and so on. So that would be another reason why you want to do things at the edge and don't want your raw data sitting on an Amazon cloud, nothing against them, or some other third-party cloud, where it can be vulnerable. We have been hearing about hacks, right? In the healthcare industry, that's always a problem, but that also comes onto the shop floor, right? It's a competition thing, it's a customer-facing thing. If you're a contract manufacturer, I worked with contract manufacturers for several years. It's not nice to tell your customers, we got hacked into, right? So there's ways in which this can be an advantage, right? And then immediate reaction. I've been talking about this for a while now, right? Just want to give a very broad, I've given other talks and there are other great speakers that you can go listen to. I want to give a very broad overview for our context here. Machine learning is this: you get the data. So you have to have some data. And nowadays we're getting better and better at using synthetic data, simulated data that is, and small amounts of data. They are now coming out with research projects that are saying you don't need this big data, huge streams of data. You just need small sets of data to get started. And then your data grows from there. That's good enough. The biggest problem, this is where 80% of your effort will be spent on. This is where I'd advise, if you're setting up an operation, even if you're not looking at machine learning, you're like, that's 5 years away, 7 years away, I don't care. Make sure that you label your data, right? What is this data? So that somebody can come in and use it meaningfully. Otherwise, you're going to be spending time cleaning and labeling and manipulating your data, and that's where most of your efforts, because the training and the actual inferences are almost instantaneous, right? They're computational times. It's the data collection. It's making sense, that it's making it machine readable. That's where your difficulties are going to be. And then, of course, you want to constantly improve. You run a set of algorithms. You learn something. You run a different set of algorithms. So you're constantly improving. You typically don't end up with one algorithm. You end up with an ensemble, and you take the best of what you learn from that, right? So that's sort of a broad overview. The reason I want to stop there is we could spend hours talking about this. This is masters and PhDs in what AI is, right? And so there are so many techniques and so many dimensions to this. And in edge computing, most of the time, you're focused on just this machine learning, that is the supervised or unsupervised learning aspects of things, right? So that's kind of like your 5-second introduction to AI. But there's good news. So that's part of the struggle too, is, how do we get people, right? With the PhDs are being stolen for hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. There are new master's programs coming up. College students nowadays, and maybe even high school students, are exposed to AI tools and techniques. But still, you got to prepare them and make them understand your use case and get them up to speed, right? So there's a huge competition in the commercial workspace to come up with low-code and no-code applications. Low-code means you just have to know enough Python or something to be dangerous, right? Python's a very good program for machine learning, right? And Python is meant to be human readable and meant to help you write code easily, right? I can learn Python. I'm a mechanical engineer. I can write Python, excuse me. So if I can do it, anyone can do it. That's how I see it, right? But then the no-code applications are even better. The idea is to just do drag and drop, right? Like LabVIEW. If you ever played with LabVIEW, right? Most of what you do to set up your studies and stuff is just drag and drop, and then you do a little bit of manipulation on the back end, and you're good to go, right? So that's a big advantage. You can make the solutions more adaptable. If you're making different types of products for different people, you can make them scalable. Power optimization, and then, sorry, kind of went down there, but cost savings is another big advantage, right? So this type of thing is, we're still 3 to 5 years behind meaningful tools, and they'll still be expensive, but that's what is going to make edge computing more and more attractive for people, right? So I wanted to switch gear, talk about the application space a little bit. Before I set that up, now when we talk about edge computing, we're not talking about a standalone silo either. So of course there are 3 ways you can run this, right? A cloud only setup, right? Many people, the best they can do right now is that. Some companies still don't even have that, there's pen and paper, but a lot of people are moving away from that. So you have cloud only solutions of monitoring and maintaining things. You have edge only, which is not really there, but you could perceive that something can be edge only. But the best model, I believe, is hybrid, where, like I said before, if you have the ability to do so, or if your data volumes are low, you can maybe upload all of your raw data and it goes to the cloud, and you can run bigger ensembles and longer data streams, data stream manipulations, and so on, right? Or you can take just the anomalies that you detect, just the patterns that you detect, just that intelligent data, and push that to the cloud. So hybrid models can also be an effective way to manage shop floors. And then what do you really sort of need to think about when you're looking at application selection, right? And we'll spin this around a couple of different ways. One is, what data sets do you have or can you collect? So, like I said, even if you're behind the curve on machine learning and you want to get your company involved in all of this, start thinking about what kinds of data, what kind of sensor integration you can do. That would be the first place. A lot of people miss that opportunity, right? What kind of sensors can you put in, right? And then what kind of devices do you currently have on your floor? How can you take advantage of those guys, right? What's the type of urgency you're working on? And then what type of profits you would end up with if you were to use edge computing. So those are some slices you can, or ways you can use to slice which parts of your shop floor you want to apply edge computing. Maybe you only start with your environmental monitoring in a clean room environment or in a general manufacturing environment. Maybe you only start with, molds or cutting tools or something else, right? It's okay. And you can expand from there as time goes on. So this is actually Sai's case study, and I'll speak to what he did. Sai works in West New York for a company that makes industrial gases. They used to be called Praxair, they're now called Linde. And for a customer of his, he did this project where they do industrial gases. And they had to come up with a way to know when the gas was running low. There's leaks involved, there's usage involved, and the struggle here is there are some plants all the way out in Louisiana and some other places where they sometimes have to go replace gas. And they can only do that when either a trucker is available or so on and so on. There's many problems with uptime, right? So he developed a solution. This is a real solution where what it does is he connected these particular high quality sensors that are already present on the tank. But without an edge solution, somebody has to physically walk up to the thing and actually read what's on there. Now, a non-edge kind of homebrew solution could be just hook up a camera, right? But this is better. It actually collects, it pools the sensor data so many times a day. That's good enough. And it knows when the volume's running low, and then it uploads that to the cloud. And then there's analytics, but there's also alarms that go off that allow people to, hook up the next truck driver who's going to that region or whatnot with the trucks. And so this is sort of an edge solution that he has real personal experience with, and I have sort of lateral experience with developing and implementing. And this was done in 2019. So you can see there are possibilities for such solutions, right? And so the other type of application, we talked about assets at the beginning, right? So there's two types of things that come up with assets. There's asset tracking itself. It's very important to make sure that you don't lose track of your tools, where they go, and so on. So it's important to use RFIDs, and now we're looking at barcodes, QR codes. With machine vision systems, more intelligent readers can allow us to maintain our assets better, right? So that's where that becomes very, very useful. Asset use tracking, right? I wanted to throw a couple of examples, and these are commercially available, by the way. Companies are able to track how many shots they're making out of mold. So I have a situation where I have a rotational molding company that's making these big hulls for my shop floor, and we have 3 tools. And one of the things that we lack intelligence on right now, and the mold shop, has promised, is telling us what volume they're running with these 3 tools. I mean, we obviously get the stamp 1, 2, 3, so we know which mold has come from which tool, but we want more data, right? We want to know which tool has better uptime and things like that, right? So that's something that you can do. Cutting tools is another classic example, right? Wear and tear, that sort of thing, right? So asset tracking, asset use tracking are 2 big areas for edge computing. So you can throw all this on the edge, and the idea there's of course the long-term learning you can do, but you can start knowing when your tool is wearing out and things like that. Where machine cleanliness, I didn't put that in there, but if you had a good vision system set up, or if you just monitored the the coolant that's being flushed out, right? If you put a turbidity sensor in it, right, and it looks at the clarity change, then what that would do is that would basically be able to tell you, right, how good the coolant is and so on, right? And then there's the part where we can do asset monitoring. And there's condition-based monitoring, and there's of course maintenance, right? So the reason I split these, and some people look at these as the same, so we're splitting hairs here, but the basic idea is when are things going wrong? And when things go wrong, you don't want an alarm to go off. So hand-on lights are very useful for knowing when something's gone wrong, right? That's great, and you should still keep using that, right? But we want safe stoppage. We don't want someone getting hurt. We don't want bad product to leave the floor, right? So there's that. And then self-healing is a big thing in software. It's a big thing in machine learning. It's also going to be a big thing in hardware, right? So let's say you have packages in on a line, and there are some very nice examples if you walk inside the trade floor, right? The trade show floor. So what happens when a package is off kilter? Do you simply want to stop the line, or do you want to be able to say, oh, it's just off kilter, just keep going, right? So there's that. So that would be an advantage where it is a form of self-healing that allows you to look at simple errors and go, we can change that later. But there are errors that you may not be able to. So you want to be able to tag them. So slapping a label on it, or being able to alert the quality control people that, hey, unit 336 has a problem, 337 has a problem. In pharmaceuticals, that could be very useful. So you just chuck those guys out at the end of the line. You don't stop the line just for a few problems, right? So those are all places where edge computing can be extremely useful. Whether you tie it to machine vision or not, machine vision would really make this useful. And then of course we want intelligent monitoring nowadays, right? We don't want to stop all 50 machines. That's how we used to do things, right? Or we used to cascade them and so on. And I worked at a company where we had SAP and a whole calibration team, and yet one time we ended up with this sensor that is used to calibrate the tool going back for its own calibration, hear me out, right, to Utah. We had two of them. One was supposed to be the backup of the other. We sent both of them at the same time. The entire line was down for a week because it's medical devices. Excuse me. It's medical devices. We can't, produce with uncalibrated devices, right? So adding more intelligence is always good. If you think about the cost of a line being down, for a week, that's just exorbitant, right? So those are all places where this can be very useful. Wanted to talk about robotics, right? Robotics is doing a lot of new things. It's not just pick and place anymore. We've got use in machine tools and stuff like that. And I'll give you an example where the adoption of robotics itself is still slow. And I'm talking about the shop floor, right? Surgical robotics is very exciting. And of course, human skill is very important there. But I'm talking about on the floor, whether it is shipping and handling or on the floor itself. The addition of AI will make things very, very interesting. A couple of years ago, I got to go to the US Robotics Roadmap Refresh, and there were a bunch of very smart people I got to talk with, and this is what they are looking at, right? You talk about professors. They are thinking about these things, right? And turning these into real-world applications. So what is really stopping robotics? So going back to my mold maker, they have this CNC machine that is an add-on to rotational molding. So it's a nice arm that can come in and drill some extra holes, cut some flues, and make things better off the line so you don't have to use people, right? If you've been reading the newspaper, I'm trying to hire 2 temp techs. People, there are so many jobs out there and you're not able to match people to them. So the CNC tool is supposed to be usable for that thing, to reduce the level of skill required. Except the problem is they've had to send a tech back to go learn how to program this thing. It's going to take them a couple of years maybe to be fully up to speed. We're trying to eliminate that by making the robots more and more intelligent, right? Giving them more edge computing capabilities, right? That sort of thing, to actually implement things on the floor. Why? Because I wanted to just pick one good example, right? So thermoforming, right? If you had boxed lunches, right? Since last year, boxed lunches have become very popular because we want all the social distancing and what have you, right? 80% of all thermoforming, it's almost criminal if you ask me, right, is done manually. That puts workers at risk. They could be doing better things. We're not talking about eliminating jobs. I know when people talk about robotics, there's always that, right? And forget commercial applications. Think about your medical device applications, right? You could make them more intelligent at a minimum. Even if it is manual, you could make it more intelligent, less stressful, train your techs to work at a higher skill level and so on, right? All of that adoption is limited because our robotics are not there yet. right? So these are the sort of real world problems that edge computing can and will solve. Vision guided robotics, right? It's almost self explanatory, right? I read this article about 2 years ago, Scientific American or something. Apparently, to date in China, it's cost effective to have someone just visually inspect them, right? Well, that's good for China. We don't have that kind of resource here. We're struggling, right? So that's where vision guided robotics can really come in, do automated quality control, reduce human errors because of fatigue, right? If you're looking at the same thing for 8 hours a day, you are going to be fatigued at some point, no joke, right? So at a minimum, it can assist people, but also again, if you want your quality control people to be more effective, then you want them to be doing more intelligent things rather than very basic visual inspection for dents or marks or scores and things like that, right? So that's where this is one of the low-hanging fruits for edge computing. You can get very cheap cameras. For example, if you went for the Raspberry Pi camera, right, it's $50. And it was originally supposed to be a teaching tool, but it's become this amazing industrial tool. The camera is $50. You can buy a Raspberry Pi Zero for $5. The Raspberry Pi Pico, I don't think it still works with the camera, for $4. So if you set up 20 stations, right, it may look like, okay, I got some cost savings, some investment going on, whatnot, right? But think about 100 stations. Think about the scales at which you can do this. So there's an enormity you can accomplish with very cost-effective tools. And then this is sort of the mainstream strategy. This goes back to a little bit of what we talked about earlier. You do a pilot, you do some data collection, you analyze it, you develop the model, and then you refine it, right? You have the edge device deployed after you have the model, after you've understood stuff. You can't just plug in an edge device, which edge devices usually have lower intelligence, and you can't expect them to actually, produce the kind of intelligence you're looking for, right? So we are sort of proposing a different strategy that we have used ourselves. But before that, wanted to talk a little bit more about this. So, sort of a different slice. So, think about it. If you're a large-scale enterprise, you don't care. You're just looking at, we have the funds. We can go dump $20 million on this and do it. What if you're a Series A startup like me, right? Where do we go? We go for cheap barcode scanners. We go for Google spreadsheets, right? We do there's all these cutesy terms you hear from entrepreneurs, right? We use all of those techniques, right? And we try to develop solutions at the lowest cost possible, right? But then I want you to also start thinking about, if you're thinking about edge, and if you're small, it's okay to be small. Right now I have a small team, but we're thinking about what happens when we're going to have 3 different floors doing this in 3 different parts of the world, right? That's my fleet size I'm thinking about, right? Then how do we manage things? What kind of sensors do we have? So, like I said before, if nothing else, start thinking about what kind of sensors you can hook up to your shop. That itself will give you huge amounts of opportunities. What type of operational environment? If you're in Minneapolis, where there's a lot of medical device companies, that's a different story from if you're in Phoenix, Arizona, which is it's either the fastest growing or one of the fastest growing places in the United States. If you're in Phoenix, there's a different story for the kind of environment you're facing, right? Or if you're in the Bay Area, you got all this salt air coming in, right? So you got to start thinking about what type of environments you're in. Then, so the thing is this goes back again, right? What we are saying for startups especially, this is not for large-scale enterprises, right? Keep it simple. Don't start thinking about, the factory of the future. That's great. I mean, you should think about that. I apologize. But don't overthink your solutions. What is one thing or a few things I can hang my hat on? That's what you want to look at, right? Understand the use case. What is the problem we are solving? What's our pain point, right? It goes back to those anomalies. What is shutting us down? What is slowing us down? Why do we get RMAs, right? That's how you want to start thinking. What is our pain point, right? Or if you're a contractor to somebody else, you start really understanding. Go talk to the people on the floor before dropping a solution on them that just adds more work for them, right? And then we're saying build quick and dirty prototypes, right? There's this dark horse prototypes, there's all these terms. Implement something. If your people don't think it's useful, take it away. Implement something else, right? And then use off-the-shelf products. And we'll give you an example of what we did. Talk to people. Field study, field survey, these are all fancy terms for just go talk to people. Talk to your customers, internal and external, right? Internal being the people who are assembling the stuff. Your contract manufacturers, your QC people, right? The shipping and handling people. Talk to them. What are they facing? And then look at what costs you have, what timelines you have, and what's their emergency, right? And sorry, when I developed these slides, I thought I'll have a projection that would be higher, but I think they'll give you the slides if you ask, or I can give you them. So, but the basic idea is there, right? So this is for hardware specific, right? We talked about solution. Computation you can actually do with a lot of free products, right? So hardware is almost never free. There's always the cost associated, right? So we are asking you to look at availability, right? The supply chain availability. So I manage a supply chain team. It is driving us nuts. We are able to get nothing. Is anybody able to get everything they want at the cost they want? It is insane, right? That's like even before it was insane. Now it is just outrageous, right? So I think they said, oh, in 6 months it'll be over. Now they're saying, oh, all of 2022 may be like this, right? We are scrounging for each and every chip we can sometimes, right? I'm sure everybody's doing that. And as I was joking, right, it's taken people, like the whole toilet paper thing has now morphed into an industrial scale where apparently in some places you can't rent a storage space, you have to bid for it because everyone's hoarding, right? So there's advantages in really thinking through what's the best type of components to pick. Don't pick something that may be very advantageous but is crazy hard to find. Go for the lowest common denominator. Go for the Arduinos. Go for the Raspberry Pis. Go for the things that can easily be mimicked and manufactured as easily as possible, right? And then firmware software stability, right? I had this problem myself. We'll go for the latest and greatest tool, grab it and build something. Company goes out of business. Now what do we do, right? So look for stability in the things that you pick, right? TensorFlow Lite is a great example. TinyML, the community is growing. These are all great examples of things you can really hang your hat on, right? There's a lot of Python stuff free on GitHub. My brother and I have published a bunch of papers. We have put stuff on GitHub. There's people doing it. Thousands and thousands of lines of code have gone up in the second it took me to say that, right? So a lot of free stuff out there that you can do. That is important when you connect that with your hardware. Ease of deployment, international availability. If you're going to be doing stuff in China, Asia, Africa, wherever you're doing stuff. And then low power, right? At scale, power becomes a problem. Right? Power becomes a problem just in terms of consumption and cost, but also in terms of heating and so on, right? So all of these stuffs you want to think about. So hopefully that gave you a few different slices of where I would pick edge, right? We don't have a formula, but this is the best we have done. So again, we have nothing to do with this company either. This is where we buy a lot of our stuff from. SparkFun, great place to go buy prototyping tools, right? And as far as I know, I think this one's also out of stock. So it's kind of a sad thing. But we were able to develop a quick demo with this. It's got an ARM Cortex processor, and my brother will be able to speak to a lot more of this, but it's got enough to be dangerous. You got an accelerometer, you can do some MEMS work with it, and it does voice activation, which is where we tried our demo, and I'll talk to our demo in a second. So if you go back to a few slides ago, where there was all this development and whatnot, we are just suggesting try low cost, quick and dirty, off the shelf, right? Then your mainstream solution, your final solution can be something that uses the latest and greatest. But if you really are thinking, should we even go down this path? A lot of the stuff can actually be done for less than $100 per node. There's the development cost of hiring a good engineer and whatnot, or an engineering firm, NREs, we're not talking about that. The actual deployment of a prototype can be done for sub $100, right? So that's what we're positioning. And then let's see if I can get this guy to work.
This is the SparkFun Edge board. It costs $15. As I had mentioned before, it can be powered by a coin cell. These boards ship with a voice activation demo. It can detect the words yes and no. When I say yes, this LED lights up. When I say no, this LED lights up. Let's try. Yes. Yes. No. 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 I believe it has to do with the microphone quality. As you can see here, the LED did light up, but it doesn't always light up. Let's try once again. No. No. Okay, there we go. It did light up.
So the point of mentioning that is, people have Apple Car or Android Auto. I only have Android experience. Anybody here with Android Auto? It turns out we thought it was actually this microphone. We developed this thing 8 months ago, 10 months ago, I don't remember. We thought it was actually, oh, it's $15, it's going to work. Sometimes if you have experience with Android Auto and you try to use the reply function, sometimes you have to scream into the thing. Just saying, it says, do you want to reply? And you have to be really loud about yes and send it or change it, right? So it turns out it has more to do with the hardware and the software, right? So that's where we want to say that this is, to excuse the pun, the edge of edge development, right? So things are going to go wrong, things are going to be a little messy, but it's $15. You can really use this for voice detection. There's a camera, there's an accelerometer, so you can do a bunch of things like fault detection and so on. There's many different. It's not just for manufacturing. You can use this in various types of prototyping applications. And then wanted to also bring this to your mind about greenfield versus brownfield, right? If you're not very familiar with these terms, it's more of a jargon thing. Greenfield means when you're starting up something new. You have a startup or a new plant or a new line for a new product, right? Versus a brownfield when you're upgrading a line, upgrading a product line or something like that, right? So there are different concerns for different things, right? So startup costs are what you see on the left-hand side. Upgrade costs are what you see on the right-hand side, right? And then you can do things from the scratch there. That's always ideal. If you think about what happened with networking technology, right? When I was still growing up in India, and we were talking about the CDMA and TDMA and all that stuff that really dates me. The point is some of that stuff was easy for India to implement simply because we didn't have cell phones for a really long time, right? And then of course that's different now, right? So greenfield always gives you that advantage. Brownfield gives you different advantage. You know what you have, but compatibility might be an issue. So really start thinking about these things. If you're a manager or if you're thinking of front-end research, start really slicing and dicing this way as well. What your application space is, what you're going to be able to do, right? Thank you. I know I'm running out of time. We spoke to some of this stuff, so I'm going to skip over this one. So what are we trying to do, right? We're trying to be mission critical. And the other thing to know, computational hardware itself is going to run out of like computational ability soon, right? So that's that advantage, a disadvantage. In terms of industries like medical devices, your manufacturing operation needs to be approved, right? So you got to be careful about how you use edge computing. Although I have to say, at least on the device side, and I've given a couple of talks just purely from the device side of things, the FDA has been really forward thinking, right? And I thought, oh, what's going to happen when Scott Gottlieb left? But even after he left, the FDA has been really promoting AI, right? So there's that, but you still have to think through what my regulatory risks are, right? And then revenue models. Explainability is this problem in AI where it does pattern recognition, and sometimes yearly so. Over the last couple of years, people have been like, I was only talking on the phone with someone. Are they tracking my phone calls? How did Facebook put an ad for this thing we talked about and I never did a Google search for, right? It still has a way of knowing, and that is very, very scary. In fact, in the 80s, one of the first solutions for asthma was developed by a professor at CMU, but he himself pulled it out because he could not explain how it was able to diagnose even better than the actual medical doctors in the profession, right? Things have changed quite a bit since then, but there's still that problem to think of, right? So for that reason, for that explainability reason, there's a lot of research, a lot of PhDs, but that's why we want to keep the human in the loop. That's another sort of jargon that's making its way. It's an important and useful jargon, but think about it, right? Humans in the loop still need to interpret what the algorithm is saying. You can't just dismiss it simply because you didn't understand it. You also have to understand it. And then if you deploy an edge computing solution, but then you take 4 hours to understand what's going on, you introduce new latency that wasn't there before, right? So there's pros and cons to all of these guys. So thinking about all of that is very, very important, right? And then sort of just a different thing we want to talk about is what, and that's why it's in a different color. What we learned is this. It's very important. That's why I said that, right? It's very important to think about what sensors, how to interface them. We have learned power management is a huge problem. If you're thinking of deploying edge solutions, it's not always true for manufacturing, but we've also done some agricultural stuff. If you're going to leave battery operated stuff there, my sustainability company right now, we use solar chargeable stuff. So that's pretty good, except in winter and in dark places. We throw stuff in the ocean. So in the ocean, sometimes things are not very good, even with solar batteries. So power consumption is very important to think about. Overheating your computation is also like just blowing up your sensors. So that's something to think about, right? Fleet management is important. So there's the edge computing part of it, where you're saying, oh, we got to do something. How are we going to deploy that stuff to fix the problems? That's something to think about. network connectivity, simple things like SIM card management. In one of our projects, we ran into a problem, right? So sometimes things are big, sometimes things are small. That was it. Thank you so much.